Thank you for joining me. This is December the 10th, 2021, and this is also an audio check. This is December the... Thank you very much. Continue.
Welcome, everyone, to another session of our Schemmel Lunch Series. Before I introduce the introducer of this young man that I know, I'd like to remind you that the church and state people will be meeting on Wednesday night back in the library. And so don't forget that. It's in 305 this time again, because there's a reception upstairs to which you're all invited. But now that we're all here and mostly seated, I'm going to turn the podium over to Bill Rao, a good friend of ours, a good friend of our speakers, and he will give you a more objective introduction than I would. Maybe. Bill Rao.
All right. Hey, everybody. Hi. Before we get into the Holocaust-denying, Jew-hating bigots that I had a discussion with, we are going to listen to this A Tale of Two Truths presented by David Myers called Israel/Palestine. I just wanted to start off with that because what will follow is going to be quite disturbing. Even listening to it yesterday, I just discovered it yesterday again. It was very disturbing content. So it's about 5 years old. It was during the Wild West times of the internet. It is a YouTube, a retro YouTube. But essentially what happened was I was holding a hangout and I had two Holocaust deniers enter the room and I debunked them. I'm going to show you how. I'm going to show you, but the most distressing of what I took away that was most distressing was how brazenly they lied and how brazenly they showed their hatred and their contempt for Jews. Ultimately, they first, they went into Holocaust denial. You can't prove this, you can't prove that. They actually said you can't prove intent. And once that got all debunked, then the truth came out. Yeah, but they're just Jews. So I want to integrate this type of show with the secular Zionist dream that is modern day Israel. I have not listened to this talk. I think this guy is about to introduce the guy that's about to talk. So why don't we just sort of get to it and see what's happening around here? Because I am not sure. All right, let's go.
Thank you and welcome everybody. It's my privilege to welcome David Myers to this venue, a friend for since 1995 when we cooperated on a conference here, which evolved into a shared publication project, which included some remarks about the history of the Jewish community in the Scranton area. David comes to us from Philadelphia, where he's spending a year away from his duties at UCLA as a member of the History Department and Director of Judaic Studies program. And he is at the Center for Advanced Studies, Judaic Studies, in Philadelphia. He just described it to me as the Garden of Eden of my field. So he's happy to be back doing research, although he's traveling quite a bit and managing that well at this early stage in the year. Is it a year-long arrangement, David? So this is great because you'll be back visiting with us. I won't say very much about what you're going to be discussing because that is your work, but I'm very eager to hear you discuss a theme from your recent book,
So am
Between Jew and
I.
Arab, The Lost Voice of Simon Ravidovich. And it's a very important contribution, an interesting story. And speaking of stories, the title of your remarks, The Tale of Two Stories, of Two Narratives, The Tale of Two Stories. Well, David, welcome. It's so good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. It really is a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come in the middle of the day. I'd like to thank again Bill, my dear friend, for his warm remarks and greetings. And I'd, of course, like to thank my parents for allowing me to be here in the most profound of ways. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be back at the University of Scranton. I spent a very formative year here, my freshman year of college, where I was introduced to the ways of the Jesuits, to the writerly and rhetorical arts that the Jesuits have refined over the course of their 500-year history. And I have a great deal of admiration and appreciation for the Jesuitical tradition, the Jesuitical intellectual tradition. And yet I'm also mindful of the fact that over the course of that that half millennium, that 500-year history of the Jesuits, there have been instances of excess of missionary zeal, excess of colonial imposition, excess of misguided faith. It may well be on that last point, and only that last point, that I would find common cause with Bishop Martino. But I make this point not to bring discredit or dishonor to our hosts, because, as I said, I do have great appreciation and admiration for the Jesuits and their extraordinary achievements, but to point out the complexities of history, the Janus-faced quality of history, the multifaceted nature of history, which seems to me no more evident than in the century-long conflict between Jews and Arabs over that piece of territory known alternately as Palestine, Eretz Israel, Israel, and a host of other names. As you may have gathered from my pointing to the multifaceted nature of history, I am particularly struck by the presence not merely of multiple narratives about that piece of territory, but the existence of multiple truths. The truth claims of the two major combatants, the Jews and Arabs, the Palestinians and Israelis, strike me as both valid and worthy of our consideration. This is a perspective that, alas, is very infrequently advanced. It strikes me that one of the optical illusions that the intensity of the conflict generates is the perspective that one side is possessed of good, virtue, and justice, and the other is possessed of evil. One side is the source of light and harmony, and the other is primarily, if not solely, responsible for the conflict. That is not a perspective that I would like to advance today. As I said, I'm very much struck by the multiplicity of truths, not just of the narratives that each side tells, but of the truths contained within the narrative. And they're, at some level, remarkably parallel except they move in opposite directions, which is to say that the Jewish story of the relationship to what Jews call the land of Israel is a story of the movement from exile to homeland. The Arab or Palestinian story is parallel in many regards, except it moves in reverse. It is a story of the movement from homeland to exile. And it strikes me that one of the features that might serve to ameliorate the conflict, that might serve to bridge the chasm between the two sides, is sorely lacking. And that is the capacity to engage in a kind of introspection and self-reflection that can permit an appreciation and understanding of the humanity of the other side. That's a theme that I would like to touch upon at the end of my remarks, that very quality that has been so infrequently present in the conflict, that capacity for self-reckoning that is the necessary condition, the prerequisite to an appreciation of the humanity of the other. But before we get there, I would like to do two things. First, I would like to discuss with you what I see as some of the key myths that prevent an understanding of the multiple truths at work in the conflict between Jews and Arabs over Palestine/Israel. And then second, I would like to discuss what I see as a possible solution to this century-long conflict, while also raising some very serious structural obstacles. And then I will conclude with a few very brief remarks about the importance of introspection, of reflexivity, of self-reflection. So let's move directly to the myths. The first myth that I would like to discuss is the myth that the land known historically as Palestine was a land without a people intended for a people without a land. That was the formulation attributed to any number of early Zionist thinkers from the late 19th century up through the 1920s. It's particularly associated with one important Zionist leader by the name of Chaim Weizmann, who became the first president of the State of Israel. And it's premised on the notion that when the first Zionist settlers began to move to Palestine in the mid-1880s, they were encountering a land devoid of discernible population. This particular piece of mythology dug deep roots in Zionist consciousness, and yet it was confounded by two very key bodies of source material. First, the actual census data on Palestine, which made quite clear that Palestine was not devoid of an actual discernible population, of human settlement. We know from a variety of census sources, including Ottoman census sources, and demographic analyses of Jewish sociologists, and most particularly a very prominent late 19th century Jewish sociologist by the name of Arthur Rupin, that there were between 400 and 600,000 Arab, Muslim or Christian residents of Palestine, that piece of territory that extends from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. In that same period, talking about 1890-95, there were approximately 25 to 40,000 Jewish residents of the Holy Land, of Palestine, who constituted what was known as the Old Yishuv, the Old Jewish Settlement. We also know of the presence of a very sizable Arab population from a number of important Zionist thinkers who made their way from Europe to Palestine in the 1890s and the first 2 decades of the 20th century and report on what they find, which is very large concentrations of Arabs, especially in rural areas and in a number of cities, including Haifa and Jaffa. So this set of evidence suggests to us that the claim recently advanced, and I mean recently, by recently I mean over the last couple of decades, recent revisionist claims that in fact the Jewish settlers operating under the aegis of the Zionist movement, a movement of national liberation devoted to the reclamation of the ancestral homeland of the Jews. These recent revisionist claims seek to wipe the map of Palestine of Palestinian Arabs. And this is simply a patently false claim and has virtually no historical foundation, and yet is repeatedly made in the name of legitimizing the Jewish assertion of a link to the land of Israel. So this is myth number one, that Palestine was essentially devoid of human content prior to the advent of the Zionist settlement project. A second myth that I'd like to discuss is the myth that Zionism was a movement of foreign colonialism which lacked all legal legitimacy. That should be subdivided into two claims. First, Zionism as a colonial movement, and second, the question of the legal legitimacy of the Zionist movement. It is indeed true that when the first Zionist settlers came to Palestine, and they came to Palestine primarily because of a push, not a pull. The push was out of European society because they faced increasing tides of anti-Semitic expression and deed. When they came to Palestine, they did not come as the representatives of any colonial power. On the contrary, they came to escape the oppressive or threatening conditions that they faced in Europe. It is the fact that when they arrived in Palestine, the Zionist settlers established a colonization office for the purpose of purchasing land. Indeed, it was an important Zionist aim to purchase land and, in some measure, gain territorial control over that land through the legal purchase of land, largely from absentee landlords known as effendi, who often lived in the more prominent centers of settlement in the Ottoman Empire in Beirut or Damascus. So there was a very serious project undertaken by the Zionist organization, later known as the World Zionist Organization, to purchase land, to cultivate it, and through that, both to allow for the rehabilitation of the Jewish national body through actual physical labor, and to allow for Zionists to gain a measure of control over the land of Israel. I think it's a mistake to claim that Zionists came to Palestine with the intention of subjugating or introducing a kind of civilizing mission upon the local population. We can accuse the Zionist organization of a good number of things, but I think that intention is not one of them. We can accuse the Zionist organization of a kind of blindness to the presence of this large native population. And there was a measure of colonization, but it was not a colonization that entailed the imposition of a kind of cultural agenda upon that native population. So Zionists do not come as the colonial agents of any European power, although European powers in this very period, in the first decades of the 20th century, are very interested in asserting control over the Middle East. The French and the British in particular divide by the middle of the second decade of the 20th century the Middle East into their respective spheres of influence. But the Jews are not the direct representatives of either, or for that matter, of any European power. Now I want to talk about the legal legitimacy of the Zionist claim to Palestine, because some have suggested that, in fact, the Zionist hold is a very tenuous one and lacks any reasonable measure of international legitimacy. One of the things that the Zionist movement sought to do, alongside its colonization of the land, alongside the agricultural labor that was deemed to be therapeutic for a Jewish national body, these are the terms used by the Zionists themselves, that had, in a sense, laid fallow for centuries in the diaspora. What it sought to do alongside this project of agricultural labor was to sway international opinion to the Zionist side. So in the first decade or so of the 20th century, efforts were made to sway, respectively, German, French, British, and Ottoman authorities to recognize the legitimacy of the Zionist claim. These efforts really reached a peak in the year 1917. On November 2nd, 1917, the new power that wrested control of Palestine from the decaying and declining Ottoman Empire, namely the British, issued what was known as the Balfour Declaration, which recognized that Palestine was and should be the national home for the Jewish people. This is a very significant development in the diplomatic machinations of the Zionist movement to gain the favor of His Majesty's government in 1917, precisely at the moment when the British gained actual physical control of Palestine. This, by the way, this formulation, a national home for the Jewish people, did not mean a Jewish state. It meant the Jews' historical claim to settlement in Palestine was recognized. But that was quite a distance away from recognition of the right to a Jewish state. And in fact, we notice that in this period, 1917 through the 1920s, Zionists of the main labor Zionist movement, the leading branch associated with the person who became the first prime minister in Israel, David Ben-Gurion, did not speak openly of a state. They spoke of creating a national society and didn't yet raise the ante to talk about a state because that was deemed to be too forward with the new British hosts. But what we do see during the period between 1917 and, say, 1930, a very concerted, deliberate effort by the Zionist movement to build national institutions that would be transformed into institutions of state. And in fact, when we make our way to the mid-1930s, the discussion does begin to shift from the creation of a national society to the creation of the state. And we see that even reflected not only in the rhetoric of Zionist leaders, but also in the language of the British hosts, who from 1922 forward were granted what was known as a mandate to govern Palestine, a mandate granted by the newly created League of Nations. In the mid-1930s, in the wake of the ongoing strife and enmity between Jews and Arabs on the ground in Palestine, the British sent a commission of inquiry to investigate the matter, known as the Peel Commission. And the Peel Commission interviewed a wide range of activists and officials on both sides in 1936 and 37, and then issued its recommendation that Palestine be partitioned into a Jewish and an Arab state, an idea which the Jewish side accepted, probably for tactical reasons more than principled reasons, and the Arab side rejected. But that already begins to establish a pattern that will recur. What is important for us is that the Peel Commission's recommendations, which were pulled off the table by 1938, constituted yet another step in the international legitimation of the Zionist cause. And that's how it was understood by Zionists. But probably this most significant piece of international legitimation of the Zionist cause came a decade later, in 1947, on November 29th, when the newly created United Nations General Assembly, in Resolution 181, announced its plan to end the British mandate over Palestine through the creation of two states, reprising, in a sense, the logic of the Peel Commission, but adding the full force of the international community. The international community, by the way, which included in the 33 votes in favor of partition both the United States and its major rival at the time, the Soviet Union. Again, the Jewish side accepted Resolution 181. The Arab side rejected 181. This leads us to a third myth. Let me just repeat the logic of the second myth, that the Zionist effort lacked international legitimation altogether. From Balfour to Resolution 181, there were a series of international steps that recognized the legitimacy of the Zionist claim to Palestine. After the resolution is issued, almost immediately after the resolution is issued, on November 29th, 1947, the local Arab population commences a military assault upon the Zionist side. And that leads to a third myth that I would like to discuss. And that myth is that the conflict of 1948, the defining conflict really of Jews and Arabs in Palestine, all that preceded it, the enmity, the hostility, the violence, was really a preface to the major conflagration of 1948. It's been a long entrenched myth in many circles that that conflict was a conflict in which David faced Goliath, in which the Jewish side, beleaguered and small, faced a massive Arab army, Arab Sea. And this claim has been subjected to very careful scrutiny over the last 2 decades or so, primarily by a cohort of scholars in Israel, or Israeli in origin, known as the New Historians, who have suggested that, in fact, number one, there was not a qualitative advantage to the Arab side in the conflict, but quite to the contrary, a very significant qualitative advantage in terms of materiel and training for the Jewish side. Number two, contrary to widespread assumptions, contrary to the fact that in the second stage of the conflict after the first phase was the attack by local Arab forces in Palestine against the Jewish forces. In the second phase, on May 15th, 1948, 5 Arab armies invaded the newly proclaimed State of Israel. Notwithstanding that, there actually was not a quantitative advantage to the Arab side either, because when one undertakes a careful analysis of the respective military forces, one sees that the Jewish side was able to mobilize virtually every qualified, able man and woman to the task of war, and they possessed a degree of training that allowed a much larger, not a much larger, a larger number of skilled military personnel to assume the battle than the Arab side, with 5 armies and the local Arab High Command were able to mount. So this is yet another component of the myth of David versus Goliath. A third component of it that has been challenged, scrutinized, and to a certain extent disabused is that the British decisively tipped their hand to the Arab side in 1947 and 1948, and there's lots of evidence, especially that assembled by one historian in particular, writing an Israeli writing in Oxford, Avi Shleim, to suggest that this isn't true either. But perhaps the most significant sub-myth of the larger myth of David versus Goliath with respect to the 1948 war is the claim that tens or hundreds of thousands of local Palestinians left Palestine in the midst of the hostilities of their own volition. We now know rather clearly and I think across the scholarly spectrum that Jewish and later Israeli forces, I say Jewish because until May 14th, 1948, there was no state of Israel. So Jewish and then after May 14th, Israeli forces engaged in forced expulsions of tens and more likely hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs. Not all Palestinian Arabs were expelled, but we know that hundreds of towns and villages were not just forcibly expelled, but then razed to the ground. Some 450 to 500 villages were razed to the ground, and a substantial portion of them were forcibly emptied of their inhabitants. Now, we know this in part because of the work, in large part because of the work of these new Israeli historians, and the most prominent among them is an historian by the name of Benny Morris, whose 1988 book, The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem, resulted from a massive archival study of largely Jewish sources, which speak explicitly about not only the order to expel, but the actual action of expulsion. Morris was attacked mercilessly in Israel for what was seen as a traitorous act, upending one of the foundation myths of the State of Israel, namely that it was created in a spirit of justice. That, in fact, what happened is the local Palestinian population took flight, confident that it would be restored to Palestine on the heels of a decisive Arab victory. The story is much more complicated than that. Morris was mercilessly attacked in the late 80s and 90s after the collapse of the Oslo peace process, which I'll say a word about in a minute. He changed very dramatically his whole worldview and acknowledging that expulsions took place, went on to justify them as a necessity of war. And his famous image is that you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. You can't create a state without this kind of act of violence at the outset. What this revisionist take of the claim of David versus Goliath pushes to the fore is the extraordinary significance of 1948 in our understanding of the competing narratives and the competing truths over Palestine. 1948 is understood by Jews and Israelis as the year of independence, as the year of liberation. In Hebrew, 1948 is known as the War of Liberation, the War of Independence. Both terms are used. Milchemet HaAtzmaut, Milchemet HaShichrur. On the Palestinian side, 1948 is known by the Arabic term Nakba, the catastrophe. And it's at this point that you see that these two narratives, these two stories of national groups contesting for the same land, begin to move in dramatically opposing directions. This might lead us to a fourth myth, and often does, namely that the Palestinians lack all agency. They lack all capacity to shape their own future. And here I would say that notwithstanding the very significant dispossession that occurred in 1948, still it is not accurate to say that the Palestinians lacked or lack agency. They possessed agency in their efforts to organize, both politically and militarily, from the 1920s up to 1948. And after about a decade period of reeling in a state of trauma, they organized themselves again in 1964 into the Palestine Liberation Organization, an organization that committed itself to a path of armed resistance, and particularly after 1967 to terrorist acts against civilians. A tack that was adopted for about 2 decades until it was formally renounced. Throughout the history of Palestinians in the 20th century, I think we can say that at various points in times, they possessed very considerable agency, very considerable capacity to shape events. And yet, one of the tragedies of Palestinian history is the legacy of absolutely abysmal leadership. A point acknowledged openly by Palestinian historians, and most significantly, I'd mentioned the Palestinian-American historian Rashid Khalidi at Columbia University, whose book Iron Cage really lays out quite clearly the series of abysmal leaders that the Palestinians were set with. A companion of this myth that Palestinians have lacked all agency is the claim that the Israelis have no partners. This is a claim that has been heard. There's a kind of continuous rhetorical line that we can draw from the 1920s to the present. We have no partner. And this is a claim that I find as false as the claim that the Palestinians lack all agency. In the sort of balancing act that is the power relations between Palestinians and Israelis, between Jews and Arabs in Palestine, it is certainly the case that the balance of power has tipped to the Jewish-Israeli side, and certainly after 1948 in decisive fashion. It isn't true that Palestinians lacked all agency, but nor is it true that the Israelis did not have a partner. In fact, part of the responsibility of political power and part of the art of diplomacy is the capacity to enfranchise and create a partner. Moreover, at various points in the period from 1948 on, in fact, Palestinian and Arab leaders have been willing to engage in negotiation with the Israeli side, which has not met their entreaties with great receptivity. It's also the case that, as we perhaps know well, for much of that history, what we've heard publicly out of the Arab side is the language of rejectionism. And yet part of what I'm trying to do is to complicate the story a bit by asserting that Israel could and should have done more to create its own partner for peace, not by repeating the mantra that there is no partner, but by working behind the scenes to actually build up a responsible, mature political party on the other side with whom it could engage in negotiation. And this leads me to the final myth that I'd like to discuss, which is the myth that there is no exit. There is no solution. It would seem so beset are the two sides by their various mythic representations of themselves and the others, so deeply entrenched in their own sense of virtue and self-victimization that a solution is impossible. Well, here's the irony. The solution is actually well known to almost all sides. It's the solution that was hammered out in that fateful decade, the 1990s, which began with secret negotiations that took place in Scandinavia between Israelis and Palestinians, which then brought into the public eye Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, and that were associated with the name Oslo. The Oslo negotiations which commenced in 1992 and really came to an end in early 2001, offered up a template for a workable solution that entailed the following components. First, Israeli withdrawal from 94 to 97% of the territories it occupied after 1967 in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Second, the division of Jerusalem. That is to say, Jerusalem would become the capital not just of Israel, but of the new Palestinian state. Third, resolution of perhaps the thorniest and longest standing problem in the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, that is the question of the refugees. It's estimated that in 1948, anywhere between 700,000 to 850,000 Palestinians fled or were displaced from their land in Palestine. The United Nations in December 1948 issued Resolution 194 that called for the repatriation of those refugees who were prepared to return to their homes and live in peace with their neighbors, or compensation to be paid to those refugees should they choose not to return to their homes. At present, it would seem, and indeed this was the logic of Oslo, that repatriation of now 4 million Palestinians to the state of Israel, to their erstwhile homes, would not be a workable solution, would be both impractical and politically impossible, certainly from the Israeli side, which means that the other clause of UN General Assembly Resolution 194 has to be invoked, and that is the clause which calls for a compensation. And indeed, in the Oslo peace process, there were very explicit discussions about the extent of compensation to be provided for refugees and their descendants, along with the promise of a token repatriation of some 50,000 Palestinians to Israel proper, and the full right of return of Palestinians to the newly created state of Israel, the newly created state of Palestine. So the right of return would be exercised not in Israel, but in Palestine. This would entail historic compromises. People would not be returning to their homes, or the homes of their parents, but they would be returning to a sovereign state of their own. It is said that agreement was reached almost to the last item, including Israeli acknowledgement of partial responsibility for the dispossession of Palestinian refugees in 1948. And yet, the deal hammered out by Israeli and Palestinian officials was not signed off by Yasser Arafat. I don't mean to place the entire blame for the collapse of the Oslo process on the Palestinian side. There were lots of things at the Israeli side that made it very difficult. But I do think that it was a mistake of epic proportions on the Palestinian side. And in fact, part of that long history of unfortunate and ill-guided leadership. That template still exists. That model solution still is on the table, but I fear that it may no longer be retrievable. And that's for two reasons. One, because the aftermath of Oslo revealed that at the end of the day, the Palestinians may simply not be able to countenance the existence of Jews in their land. And second,
I just want to say that that's kind of what I think as well. I think the fact that Jews are there at all is an impediment to the Palestinian peace plan. So a one-state solution, one Israel, is the only solution. Let me let this guy carry on.
And maybe even more significantly, it may be that the Israeli project of settlement building that commenced after the 1967 war, that was pursued by every government regardless of ideological coloration, that settlement project may make a two-state solution impossible, because extricating 50,000 to 100,000 settlers, those who would not be swapped back to Israel as part of a peace agreement, those who would either be remain where they were or be forcibly removed. Either of those prospects strikes me as highly unlikely. And in this regard, it may be that the Israeli project of settlement building, which was understood as part and parcel of the ethos of that pioneering spirit to reclaim the land, may prove the very death knell of the one solution that can assure the continuation of a Jewish state. Because if Israel is not able to extricate itself from the West Bank, if it is not able to pull up the most ideologically committed settlers, then it will essentially be in control of the entire terrain from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, and either can grant all individuals in that territory rights of citizenship, in which case they would very likely vote a Jewish state out of existence, or it can maintain a two-tiered system, two regimes of legal status for Jews and Arabs, which in other contexts went by the name apartheid. I find myself in a state of considerable pessimism about the future because of these two structural obstacles to a plan that both sides know well. And yet, my hope rests largely with the fluidity of events in the Middle East and in Palestine in particular. I never believed that there would be a moment when Israelis and Palestinians were sitting together discussing the most intricate, tricky, and involved matters, and were arriving at considerable agreement. So based on that principle, perhaps there is hope. But if there is to be change, it absolutely requires, not as a sufficient condition, but as a necessary condition, the kind of introspection and self-reflection that I mentioned at the beginning. It's the kind of introspection and self-reflection that the main protagonist of the book that Bill Rao mentioned, Simon Ravidovich, possessed in the early 1950s. Simon Ravidovich was a Jewish thinker, part of the founding faculty of Brandeis University, who believed that after 1948 it had become a moral and political imperative of Israel and the Jewish people to address equitably the Arab question. And for him, that meant two things. It meant an end to statutory discrimination against Arabs who lived in the newly created state of Israel. And it meant, provocatively, the repatriation of Palestinian refugees to the newly created state of Israel. Now, as I've suggested, the latter offer or proposition strikes me as unworkable in today's world. But what I would like to hold on to from Ravidovich is this capacity for self-reflection, introspection, and self-reckoning that allowed one to see the humanity of the other. There were fascinating glimmers of this in the Oslo peace process, and I'd like to mention just one example. The efforts of an Israeli and a Palestinian scholar, Dan Baron and Sami Adwan to produce a shared textbook, Israeli and Palestinian textbook. Not to blend the two into one, but to stand the two side by side so that children could understand there is another perspective out there in the world. This represents the kind of self-reckoning introspection that I'm speaking of. Ultimately, what I think is necessary, and I certainly can't promise success, is transcending history precisely by confronting history, by extending beyond oneself to engage in a critical inquiry into the least appealing, embarrassing, shameful episodes in one's own past in order to recognize the virtue of another's. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so I think this was a fantastic speech. Gave you a very impartial view of what happened, although he did not provide the details that I'm going to provide to you now. So, as you'll notice, in most of northern Israel, the Galilee, there's lots of Arab towns. People didn't leave, they stayed, nobody cared. But on the road from from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it's a climb through a mountain, right? It's almost like this road through a valley with, on both sides there's hills. So you're sort of at the bottom of this, not very high, but high enough, right? So you're at the bottom of this, the road cuts through these two hilly nature. And on those hilly natures, on the hills on both sides, are where Arab villages were. And the Arabs in those Arab villages were combatants in that they supported outright the incoming army, or they wouldn't, or they supported outright the establishment or the war against the state of Israel, or they did not heed the Israeli call for them to leave, because there was, Israel needed control of those heights in order for the convoys from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, with all the vital supplies that were needed in those days, because that was the only road open. Israel needed that clear. And during the lead up to the War of Independence in 1948, the experience was for these convoys to come under attack from these Israeli villages. Some of them were, some of the convoys were destroyed and lives were lost, and it was war. Okay, so to say that the Arab villages were just, napalmed or something is nonsense. It's nonsense. They were cleared out for military purposes. Simple. The residents, that's the way it is in war. If there's something in your way, you have got a few choices. You can just bulldoze your way through it, or you could negotiate with those who want to leave, or you can try and make peace with the aggressors on top of the hill one way or the other, but you got to get them out. That is not what happened in Jerusalem, on the hills of Jerusalem. The Arabs that lived there in the hills of Jerusalem were aggressors. They were enemy combatants, and those that were asked to leave, some of them actually did comply, and they probably are still residents of Israel today, or their descendants are, and most of those who were, who were swept away because they were enemy combatants, they kind of went to Jordan anyway. Jordan is the true Arab Palestine. So, it's kind of a win-win for everybody if Israel annexes, takes over the whole of Judea and Samaria, and Arab Palestine is recognized as a place, and it is on the territory of the Kingdom of Jordan, which essentially was designated as Arab Palestine in 1922. I think it was 1922 at the San Remo conference. So that puts a bit of context onto that. Okay, before we move on, hello Randolph, how you doing, buddy? Come on in. Before we move on, I just want to let you know, yes, the room is open. You can join by phone, or you can join by the Google Meet link in the description. If I can find it, I'll stick it on. I'll stick it on, man. It looks like that was it. Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, that's it. You can join using that one as well. So, Randolph, now that I see that you're watching, I would like to... Oh, it's okay. I understand that. I understand that. But still, it is the weekend, and I'd love to have you join anytime, okay? I'm just going to carry on with this show, and if you don't join, I'll probably pick it up again later on this evening. But I do have a kind of an agenda for this one, although you are part of it. So if you come in, the door's open. Actually, while you're watching, I think this would be a good time for me to bring in this little issue. Let me just see if it's big enough. What did I do wrong? I did something wrong. Shit. Okay, yeah. All right, this is what I wanted to bring in. Hang on a second. Yeah, you can listen to this one, Randolph. It's not a... It's a CBC. Ooh, I like that one. It's a CBC. What am I doing here? Why have I got two of the same things? Oh, so. Where's that? What's that? What's that? Oh, all right. Sorry, boys and girls. I have a little bit... Okay, there we go. Ah, I'm actually getting there. I am actually getting there. All right, here we go. Good. So, oh, damn. Sorry, guys. Okay, there we go. Yes. Yes. Right, so on the CBC News, posted yesterday, December the 9th, 2021. Headline: Quebec teacher removed from classroom for wearing hijab under law banning religious symbols. Let me carry on. Okay, so the subheadline under Bill 21, some civil servants in positions of authority cannot wear religious symbols at work. No religious symbols. Take off your cross, Christine. So, an elementary school teacher in Chelsea, Quebec, says she was told she could no. Ooh, I made that too big. Can you see that? Yeah, that's fine, right? I'll just do that. There we go. An elementary school teacher in Chelsea, Quebec, says she was told she could no longer teach in class because she wears a hijab, which is Quebec law under Bill 21. After working several months as a substitute teacher with the Western Quebec School Board, Fatima Anvari says she was asked to apply for a more permanent position, teaching a grade 3 class at Chelsea Elementary School. Anvari began that job earlier this fall, but after just 1 month, she says the school principal told her she had to move to a position outside the classroom because she wears a hijab. The principal told her the decision was made after a discussion. Excuse me. The principal told her the decision was made after a discussion with the school board's human resources department. Honestly, at that second, it was just shock. It was very hard to process, Anvari told CBC. Under a fairly new Quebec law, also known as Bill 21, some civil servants in positions of authority, including teachers, can't wear religious symbols while at work. A recent decision by the Quebec Court of Appeal, the province's highest court, denied a request by the English Montreal School Board to uphold an exemption of English school boards from the law. A Quebec Superior Court judge had ruled that English school boards should be exempt from the law, saying the board's desire to foster diversity by choosing who they hire is protected by the minority language education rights in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But the Quebec government soon appealed that exemption, meaning it can't be applied until the appeals court hears the case. Meanwhile, there are several court challenges against the law which could last years and eventually make their way to the Supreme Court, where hopefully they'll be kicked out. Anvari says the hijab is now part of her identity. Yes, I am Muslim, but for me, the hijab holds other meanings of just my identity and how I've chosen to represent myself as a strong person in a world that may not want me to be myself, she said. But it's still a religious symbol at the end of the day, so that's why it has a conflict with the law. You notice how they put religious symbol on the one hand and law on the other side, on the other hand? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The teacher and the parents blame the law, not the school. Neither Anvari nor the parents who spoke with CBC blame the school, which they all said fosters a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere. Instead, the parents say the law, Bill 21, should never have been passed. Quote, I'd like the government to see what it's like for an 8-year-old to lose their teacher because of something like this, unquote, said Kirsten Taylor Bosman, whose daughter attended class with Ms. Fatima, as students called her. All right, I'm going to call out this mother. I'd like the government to see what it's like for an 8-year-old to lose their teacher because of something like this. This is an example to the 8-year-old. You see, secularism is maintained in Quebec, in Canada, at all costs. You want to be a minority. You want to put yourself on the fringes, outside of the law, outside of the secularist nature, the secularist culture of our country, of our province. This mother should be ashamed of herself. Taylor Bosman said she was initially surprised when she received a letter from the school principal indicating Anvari would leave after just 1 month, but that quickly evolved into shock and anger once she learned why. It was just awful, upsetting, she said. These are not the values that we teach our children. So it's really hard to explain this to our kids. What an idiot. Are you telling me that you're not going to explain to your child what that hijab means, what's behind the hijab, the Muslim behind the hijab, the religion and the Allah and the Quran and the anti-democratic principles that Islam insists on, the laws against apostasy, the punishment. You've got to explain all that in context with the lady wearing a hijab, and you don't want the government to. If the government can only see what an 8-year-old has to go through when a teacher gets removed for wearing a hijab. Oh, for fuck's sake. Okay, rant over. Oh shit, what do I do? Right. Let's carry on. Due to privacy reasons, the Western Quebec School Board would not confirm why the teacher had been reassigned. The board said, like all Quebec school boards, it must comply with the province's laws, including Bill 21. Yes, exactly. In the English community, we're not in favor of this bill. You know why? Because you're the English community of Catholics and Protestants. That's why. The school board is not comprised of atheists, which it should be. In fact, nobody on any board, on any committee, in any council, in any public arena in this country of Canada should be a theist or outwardly a theist. Impartiality is crucial. If you're a theist, you will be biased. You will be the legislative or council prayers in the morning will be what gives you that sort of holier than thou entitlement to push. I don't like the hijab point of view. Fuck you. Carry on. In the English community, we're not in favor of this bill. We find it discriminatory, but as citizens of the province of Quebec, we are expected to follow the law and will do so, said interim board Chairman Little Baby, Crybaby Wayne Daly. Heidi Yetman, president of the teachers' union that represents Anvari, said her union has always been against the bill, especially since it unfairly targets women. Are you out of your fucking mind, Heidi Yetman? How does it unfairly target women? It frees women. It's only the women that have to wear these fucking strange clothes because of their religion. They're forced into it. Just because one young kid, young teacher, ooh, it's part of my life and my identity, doesn't explain why. Just it is. So what? If somebody wants to wear Darth Vader masks all the time, and they're a public worker, they say they're a teacher, should they be allowed to wear a Darth Vader mask? The religion, or a spaghetti monster mask? Come on. Leave your hijab at home. Right. Unfairly targets women, my arse. It's really sad because it puts like a grey cloud over the province, she said. This is Heidi Yetman. It's very sad to hear that there are students who enjoyed this teacher since the fall and now have found themselves without a teacher. Oh, no, you see, this lady with a hijab is now not a teacher anymore because she won't take off her hijab, right? It's not because she's wearing one. It's because she won't remove it. And now they don't have a teacher. So now they don't have a teacher. These children come to class every single day. They come in, they take their coats off, they hang up their bags, they go to their desks, and they sit, and then 9 o'clock comes, the bell goes, and they don't have a teacher. And they sit there until, what, 3 o'clock? Then the bell goes. Then they can get up and go home. The next day they come in, 9 o'clock, bell goes, no teacher, because she was wearing hijab. No teacher. See how they try and spin this news? Without a teacher, my arse. Again, this is the theists, the Protestants, the Catholics, and the Muslims banding together to spew irrational rhetoric about their poor Bill 21. But Taylor Bosman wants the Quebec government to explain its opposition to diversity, in this case of discrimination. You're an idiot, Taylor Bosman. If you don't understand Bill C-21 or Bill 21, it just says we're a secular province, and we shall remain a secular province. Nothing you can do or say will prevent us from remaining a secular province. Okay? So you, Taylor Bosman, can just go and fuck right off. In an ironic twist, Anvari continues to work at the school on a literary project for students targeting inclusion and awareness of diversity, although she acknowledges it is still a teaching opportunity. It's important to educate and to raise awareness on these topics so that the kids are well aware of what's going on around them, she said. I think that it was a great way to navigate the situation by the school and the school board. A growing assortment of green ribbons, green is Anvari's favorite color, was seen tied to the chain link fence outside the school this week, where a sign sits asking people to tie a ribbon to oppose Bill 21. You see this? Treason. These people should be executed for treason. opposing Bill 21. How dare you? You know what? This is what it should be. The Quebec government should enact a law, state that, this is it. If you oppose Bill C-21, Bill 21, which is the law imposing secularism on the public, on public servants and stuff, I think it's a fantastic law. But if you oppose that law, that is treason. Because to oppose secularism is to justify oppression. Okay? We don't want oppression, especially not religious oppression. Or any oppression, but religious oppression? No. The school community has rallied around the teacher and organized a letter-writing campaign to the school board. Quebec Premier François Legault and CAQMNA Robert Bassier, who represents the area. A protest was also planned for this Sunday. Now, today's Friday, so that's 2 days from now. A protest. And Vari said she's seen the cards, drawings, and ribbons, and knows the local community is behind her, and she hopes the government takes notice about what children could inadvertently learn from Bill 21. Yes, inadvertently learn from Bill 21 that secularism is king. There is no way to come in and barge into our secular schools with your hijab. Huh? Take it off. Just take it off. That's the law. It is the law. So just take it off. She goes on. This is not a story just about me. I think it's a story about humans and how we live amongst each other, and just to be accepting of any difference, whatever that may be, race, religion, gender identity, cultural background, she said. I think the support just shows that kids think beyond all of these labels. They just think of love and they think of compassion, and that makes me so hopeful. So ultimately, here we have a story of a woman who flouts the law. The law is quite clear. No hijab, no cross, no kippah. Okay, nothing. Don't do that. Now, why is it? Why is it specifically that it's the Muslims who flout the law? I don't see stories of Jewish teachers flouting the law. I don't see stories of Jewish men flouting the law. Or Christians, they put the cross probably, inside their clothing for the duration of their work day, and then they take it out. Well, hijabi lady, get to school in the morning. On your way to school, take off your hijab, put it in your purse, and at the end of the school day, put your hijab on and go home. Okay? It's not difficult. Don't be a fucking cunt. So, That was a bit of a rant, wasn't it? Boy, that really was a rant and a half. But you know what? I kind of felt that I needed to get that out. Yes, yes, I did. Okay, so that was me reading a little bit of the. Ooh, you know what? My spectacles are rather filthy and I can't see a damn thing. See better without them than I see with them. Well, especially close up anyway. I don't know why I wear them close up because I can see quite fine close up. But it's a habit that I always know where my glasses are if I'm always wearing them. Get it? We still haven't gotten to the meat and potatoes of this episode yet, and we will. All right, before I continue with the debunking or with the bigots, I'm going to attend to my chat room and say hello to all my friends. True melee, God equals the square root of -1. Rebel melee, Randolph Richardson, we've connected. Lucky 7 Wolfen, how you doing, man? You got a lot to say, huh? Good, I love it. Telling people what to wear. No, I'm not telling them what to wear. I'm telling them what not to wear. Don't wear things that antagonize me. Don't wear things that trigger me. Don't wear your religious symbols in public. Otherwise, I'm going to punch you in the head and you are going to go down. I'm just kidding. I won't. But you know what I mean. Well, you don't know what I mean, because I don't like the way religious oppression slowly creeps into our free society. I intend to call it out where I see it and to stop it. Nip it in the bud. You want to be a cultist? Be a cultist at home. Take your Muslim cult, your Jewish cult, your Christian cult. Do it at home. Don't bring it out into the open. It's nothing to be proud of. If you bring it out into the open, rational people will look at you really funny and start to question you. Huh? Are you okay? Do you need medical attention? Huh? Does God need? Is God kind of unable to help you understand what Bill 21 really means? Fuck. Who was being oppressed? Secular people are being oppressed. Still, very oppressed. Look at the tone. Look at the tone of that teacher and the school and the school board and everything. They all supported her because shame. Look what the children have to see. What a lot of shice. Wearing a hijab, if you work for a public institution, is illegal. Quebec promotes secular values, only secular values, okay? So if you present yourself in public, you present yourself in public as a Quebecer and as a secular Quebecer, because that's what everybody is in the streets. In your home, do what the fuck you want. She can take off her hijab when she comes to work. She can put it on when she leaves. That's what all the others do. Okay? Everybody does it. Okay, I'll tell you a story. Many, many years ago, I had to deal with the immigration department here in where I live. And I through somebody I know. Unfortunately, I had protectia. In other words, I knew somebody. I was able to speak to somebody at the guy who ran the regional immigration department. I got to speak to him, and I met him face to face. He was an all business kind of guy. This is the law. This is Canadian law. This is the law. The law. He was all about immigration, Canadian immigration to the letter of the law. Okay. And I thought that, wow, this is quite amazing that they've got this guy as a as the head of this regional government immigration department, because he was kind of scruffy, old and scruffy. But anyway, nothing stood out about him, because we were indoors. Nobody was wearing any any hats, because we were indoors, and I didn't think anything of it. He didn't, I wasn't wearing one. Nobody was wearing a hat. But I found out later that this guy is an ultra-Orthodox religious Lubavitch Chabadnik Jew. And what struck me was that during that time that I spoke to him in his government office at work, he wasn't wearing his head covering. You know how these ultra-Orthodox Jews gotta wear their head covering no matter what they're doing. They're always, they're always making sure that the kippah hasn't blown off or slipped off or something. Well, this guy, he accepted the fundamentally secular nature of the federal government's outlook on how to promote Canada, for example. There's no religion in the federal government. Okay, it's banned. Can't be religious, outwardly religious in the federal government. And this ultra-Orthodox Jew, in order to do his job, took off his yarmulke, took off his kippah, got to work, did his job. At the end of the day, I'm sure he put his yarmulke on, he put his black hat on, and he went to shul. Okay? So this young hijabi woman in Quebec could have had just as much respect for the law as the ultra-Orthodox Jew that I met some time back in the immigration office. So there you go. You follow the law, don't like it, go fuck off and live in Saudi Arabia or Iran or wherever the hell you like. Go. Get out of here. Get out of my secular space. Fuck off. And that's all I got to say on that. Moving along. Okay. This is the part that that is a problem. I'm just going to reset stuff. Hold on a sec. I have to reset stuff because... Oh, okay, not so bad. Not so bad. Not so bad. Not so bad. Hold on. I'm getting there. What I do is I construct my scenes sometimes as I off the cuff, because sometimes the plans that I have in my head don't always work out on the live stream. It's funny how that works, isn't it? But what I want to do here is, I'm going to fade this in right there. Okay. This is from Wikipedia on Belzec extermination camp. I'm going to keep this up there while we run. This is the okay. This is a bit of a trigger warning. So I'm going to warn anybody who's triggered by bigotry and an absolute hatred for the Jews and Holocaust denial. If you're triggered by that, then you'd best take some Xanax or something, because in this retro clip, actually take them on and call them out, debunk them, and I also want to show you how they lie. Man, do they lie. So here we go.
Well, yeah, of course. You know what my answer's going to be. It's because it sounds dodgy.
See, this is why I say, when people give me that evidence, I say, I'm going to suspend judgment until you find the evidence.
But I mean, what does that mean? What are the implications of this? Belzec? What are the implications in this exists? What does that mean for the rest of the Holocaust or whatever, the Nazis?
So they're talking about the Belzec extermination camp, or Belzec concentration camp, as they call it. But listen to how they make excuses.
Well, it means that there's no. Well, the problem with the Holocaust is that during the time of the Holocaust, are you familiar with typhoid? Typhoid was an epidemic throughout the Holocaust, right? And that's a possible cause of death.
Can I just say, and just let me finish this. Do you deny the Holocaust, right? Or are you just saying that
there's
reason to doubt some of the story?
Yeah, there is. I'm not saying that the Holocaust. Well, actually, I'm not saying the Holocaust didn't happen. I doubt the numbers.
So okay, so let's start off here. He doesn't doubt that the Holocaust happened. He has a problem with numbers. Okay, I'm going to sort out some numbers pretty soon.
Well, I don't think that's unreasonable, really, because in wartime there's always propaganda. So it would make sense that they would try and make it worse to make the other, like the Britain look better. It would make sense that they would do that.
Because it's like their number is 6 million, and I've already took 600,000 off it, and I could take another million off Treblinka. Just because what my advice would be to.
So okay, well, so I shouldn't have stopped. Sorry, let him finish the sentence.
Is to actually investigate it. Like, if you investigate it, if you believe in critical thinking, because when you're talking about crimes, when someone's accused of murder, you have to have a high standard, don't you?
Yeah, but you can't critically, obviously, in this situation, because it's something that's.
All right, I just want to before we carry on, because I know this is coming up, I need to read something. And I'm going to read that. Okay. Belzec was Belzec is Polish, was a Nazi German extermination camp built by the SS for the purpose of implementing the secretive Operation Reinhard, the plan to murder all Polish Jews. A key part of the final solution, which entailed the murder of some 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. So just remember, it is the extermination camp, SS, implementing plan to murder all Polish Jews. Remember that, okay?
It's sealed, isn't it? It's a
Correct,
it's
yeah.
done deal, right? So like even just bringing it up, it's like, oh, dude, man, what the fuck? Like,
Exactly. You're not even allowed to question. Well, you're allowed to question it in the United Kingdom. You're still allowed to be.
it's illegal in Germany to deny
Yeah,
the
it's
Holocaust.
illegal in Germany. It's illegal.
It might be illegal in Canada as well.
But I don't know. See, the problem is that there is reason to doubt, because the reasons to doubt are that typhoid was rampant throughout Europe, and an argument could be said that the people who did die.
So what he's saying here is that the people who died in concentration camps in Germany, they died by typhoid. They weren't, starved. They weren't worked to death. They weren't put in disease-ridden environment. They were not denied sanitation. But somehow it was typhoid that killed them.
Died of typhoid.
The reason to doubt is you can't trust fucking reports when it comes down to propaganda and war.
There's also no proof of intent. There's no there's no orders anywhere to
proof of intent. This is what I was going to say. There's no proof of intent. This guy's name, I think, is Phil. I think it comes up, Phil. But there's no proof of intent, okay? Let me repeat. Belzec was a Nazi extermination camp built by the SS for the purpose of implementing the secretive Operation Reinhard, the plan to murder all Polish Jews. Plan, murder, intent. Okay? Are we clear? Are we clear on that? Yes, we are.
kill Jews. There's no orders.
No orders.
Like from anywhere.
See?
There's no orders from Hitler or from any officer saying to kill the Jews. The only orders are to put them in concentration camps.
Okay, so there's no orders to kill the Jews in an extermination camp, but the orders are to put them in concentration camps. So just based on that, he should have said to himself, well, hold on, why would they be ordered to put in concentration camps? What's the point?
But that's what everyone was doing. Like even the British did that. Even the
Oh, now he's going to the British concentration camps in Africa and all the different concentration camps in history, I guess, that he can try and make up.
Americans put the Japanese Americans in.
How many Japanese Americans died of overwork, of exhaustion, of malnutrition, of typhoid in the American concentration camps, which you claim are concentration camps on the same level as the Nazi concentration camps for the Jews? Are you out of your fucking mind? That's a yes.
Concentration camps.
Weren't we also like the first people to do eugenics as well? Didn't we create that field?
Yeah, well, we did that.
Eugenics. Now he's talking about eugenics.
Well, yeah, we had policies in place that only ensured that Europe. We had a very selective immigration policy anyway.
I'm pretty sure they built upon our foundations. We did the initial field of study in eugenics, and they kind of took our work and moved on with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Hitler didn't want to invade Britain, because we're Germanic, aren't we? That's what British people are, Germanic.
We're fucking hard. That's why, son.
See that?
Yeah.
Hear that? The reason Hitler didn't want to invade the United Kingdom or Britain was because the British people are Germanic.
You don't want to fuck with us because you'll get an English headbutt.
Yeah, we would have.
I'd like to see you try Hitler.
I'd love to see Hitler try and invade England. Yeah.
Now they're supporting England. Yeah, if Hitler had tried to invade us, we would have kicked his butt.
That's good.
Are you still there, No Brains?
No brains. That's the guy. That's one of the guys. That's right. He was a really nice guy, I suppose, but he was a real bigot. He's got a distinctive voice. I'll tell you who he is.
I don't know if No Brains is there. No Brains?
Yeah, I'm here. What's up?
That's him.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I just want you to know I don't hate Donald Trump.
Ah, okay. Cool.
I think it's all right. Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's...
It's just it's so addicting the amount of like cool points you get.
I guess he's a Trumper. Well, yeah, no brains. Pretty sure he's a Christian. Pretty sure.
If you like go into a chat room and like you start bashing Donald Trump, and then everybody in there hates Donald Trump as well. You know, like there's a lot of reward there.
And same on the other side, though. That's what I find funny about the whole thing. Everyone's like, "Oh, Hillary," and then just the left versus it's just a fucking joke, to be honest. It's like,
Yeah,
Right-wing bigots everywhere.
I agree with that, no doubt.
Little bit is like arguing about like you're like, "Oh, you know, I'm a fan of this," but it's just fandom. It's like your sports team.
Yeah, I've sort of been like unexcited about Trump ever since he attacked Syria. So, I mean, I voted for him. I still support him a little bit, but I'm not like terribly excited about him.
He can't do anything. He can't change the institution.
Right. It'll be much easier if he was a dictator or a monarch or something like that.
I did see the what you mentioned. I did see something about. Bear in mind, like I'm not an American, so I don't know that much. I'm not that informed about all this stuff. I don't really pay attention to it that much anyway. But I saw some video, undercover video of like people that were at the top of the DNC, is it? And they were like, yeah, they were rigging shit. They had these like little body secret hidden cameras, and they were talking about how they were going to like pay for votes or something. And I mean, again, it could have been bullshit.
They do get back into the Holocaust denial after a little bit.
I'm sure there's rigging on both sides. The whole
I can't remember how long. I'm just gonna let it run though.
anyway, so that's why it's bullshit to like support one side because if you actually
I mean,
look at it properly, like you don't
them
know the truth.
ragging on lefties is pretty funny.
Yeah, I make fun of those people too. Do you call them Trump apologists? Because no matter what he does wrong, they'll apologize and justify it.
But I will admit, like you said, there is one thing I like. The only reason that I will go into a chat and support Donald Trump is because it's funny to annoy leftists.
Hey, you know how else you can annoy leftists? That you can tell them that Harry Potter wasn't real. It was just a book. It was just fiction.
Harry Potter.
What?
Yeah, because like the white guy was like real bad, and he was like a racial purist, and he was all like blonde hair and blue eyed, and he was the bad guy, and then the girl was like the best one. I mean, it's like all of their biases that they have are like confirmed in Harry Potter.
I guess
He's Voldemort's kind of bold as well, so he's a bit of a...
I guess it would have helped for me to know my Harry Potter. I have to admit that I do not know my Harry Potter, but I do know that Harry Potter exists because there's a book that says that Harry Potter exists. That much I do know.
She's doing all them classes and stuff, and she's like hyper intellectual, and like the dudes are kind of dumb, and she's always having to like sort them out.
Exactly.
Some communist cunt. No doubt.
Communist cunt.
And then like the race mixing, like the
Oh yeah, you race mix.
the ball or whatever. Yeah, he had the Asian girlfriend.
Oh Jesus.
I'd throw that book across the fucking wall.
Oh, did anyone watch? Did anyone seen the new Alien?
No.
I haven't seen
No,
that
it
one.
wasn't, and it really pissed me off because the same thing happened in that. Like, I just hate
I haven't seen Alien or Aliens 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, or this one, New Alien. Never heard of it.
force it into the film to be cool. That really pisses. It put basically right. If you've ever seen Prometheus, have you seen the original one, the first one, Prometheus?
I saw the one where I don't know, maybe it was 3 years ago or 5 years ago.
That's the one, yeah. Well, in this new one, there's another robot, and they're like gay robots. Like this
I'm
one
gonna
robot's
speed
not
it up
kissing the
a
other male
bit.
robot, and it's like, for fuck's sake, man, gay robots. Like, and not only that, the lead character, there's like some guy that basically the captain of the ship dies, and some dude has to take control, who's second in command, and like somehow he's like a proper little bitch, and like this little skinny dweeby girl is like more of a leader than he is, and he's like crying, and she's like, "I'll take control," and like somehow she's like this super girl. And then there's another scene in the film where they just deliberately put a black man and a white woman having sex in there in the shower. So there was the gay thing, gay robots. There was the black and white woman in the shower sex scene, and then there was this thing where like the captain, second in command, had to take
All right,
control.
so here we
couldn't
have
do his
some
job and was a little
some
bitch,
big
and this little fucking skinny girl had to like take charge. And
you have some bigotry here.
so then it just pissed me off. I was just like, fuck this film, man. It was fucking dumb.
Yeah, I honestly I don't watch movies.
I don't.
I haven't.
I watched it at a friend's house. I was forced to watch it. I don't watch new films.
Well, man,
Well, he certainly has an
you're rare.
opinion.
If that's the case, you and I were the minority on that because
Yeah, I pulled my hair
everyone's
out of my
always like,
TV.
"Did you see that movie?" It's like, no, man, I didn't.
I haven't had an aerial in my TV since I was like 14. As soon as I discovered the internet and I didn't have to watch adverts, I was like, fuck this shit. And then eventually I got bored of watching TV and movies on the internet, and now I just like, reading and podcasts and shit. So instead of
Same.
So where do they get, if they like reading and podcasting and everything, then how do they get there? How come they're so ignorant?
yeah, I don't play him anymore. I do like him. I can't say I don't like him. Who doesn't like fucking video games? I just don't do it anymore.
That's what I don't
I don't have a
understand.
console. I've got a PC. I've got a few games on here, but I don't
What
play.
podcasts
Where's
and
this-
stuff do you listen to?
where's this evidence
Sorry?
for that the concentration camp not
Ah, this is where I came in and challenged them.
or whatever?
Yeah, good point.
All right, so from this point on is where I kind of chimed in and started taking them on and debunking them and questioning them. So, how long have I been streaming? 1 hour and 47 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, because this is where it gets really exciting, I'm going to end this episode right now and follow it on with a continuation into part 2. Maybe. Hello, Randolph. You may turn on your microphone, sir. I think. There you go. You can unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
I heard you just ending the stream. My timing is just
No,
awful,
your
isn't it?
timing is perfect. Your timing, I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the stream, if I don't have a room going, then I cut it off, right?
Okay.
So I've got to get rid of that stupid message. How do I do that? Where is it? Get out.
So I noticed you have a topic about normalizing strong atheism, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my goal.
I'm interested.
That's my goal. Nothing,
Okay.
none of this fucking namby-pamby bullshit. You know, I don't think we should give in at all to these theists and their possibilities. And you don't know everything, and you can't know everything, and all this kind of shit. I think we should
I know, that really-
stand up strong.
That really gets under the skin of a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's
We don't handle it well.
I promote the normalizing atheism stuff.
Oh, do
so
you? Oh, okay.
that's why this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
that's why this interests me, because you're working at it from another angle, which I think is fantastic.
thank you.
The more people doing this, the better.
That's exactly it. That's exactly the only thing that's going to work, is the more of us that join forces, speak up, and are not afraid to be ourselves, to be our atheist selves, and not wear a silly mask in public, even in front of your family. Come out.
Or a silly hat.
Yeah, exactly. Come out and be proud of your rationality, of your newfound.
I like the way
rationality.
you say that. Be proud of the rationality. Yeah, because I don't see that atheism is something in particular to be proud of, because it's just a classification.
Right.
But the being rational takes effort. So yes, that is something that can be an achievement. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I've just listened to too many theists and their bullshit. The Bible. Even when I say,
Yeah.
I don't accept the Bible. Don't bring me the Bible. In fact, I've had a hold on a sec. Let me get my ducks in order here. Hold on. I should have a camera on there. Ah, there we go.
I'm still here.
Yeah, no, I'm just getting my camera working. It's going to take time because my computer's a little slow. Just a little slow. There we go. All right. Oh, you switched to your camera. Okay.
That's why I told you I'm still here. So
Yeah, no, I see you switched your camera off. Well, I switched mine. Oh, there we go.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. It's just getting a little cold here, so I changed. Put a sweater on. So
yeah, I've got a heater going. We've got 4 degrees.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the approach that I'm using with the Normalized Atheism campaign, which is part of the Canadian Atheists, one of the campaigns we're promoting, is to use an approach that is gentle and non-confrontational, which I sense is a little different than the approach you're using, which is fine. I have what we're asking theists to do is less rather than more. So what we're doing is like what happens is when somebody is asked, do you believe in a God, or are you a Christian, or something like this, and the answer is no, I'm an atheist, the response can sometimes be condescension, can be, oh, we're worried about the afterlife, or they start challenging, right? The stuff that you're talking about a little bit, and some of the stuff you're talking about. And then, but if they're a theist, they believe in some God or part of some religion, it's usually, oh, okay, and they go on their merry way, and as if that's normal. So what we're asking for theists to do is to treat us the same as when someone answers in the positive, that they're a theist. So that way they see us as equal.
Yeah, but you see, they're not equal.
And by asking them to do less, we think the lazy approach will be more appealing. And I've got good feedback from quite a few people on it. Now, there's some people who want a more aggressive approach, which is where your campaign comes in, I think.
Hopefully, because that's all I got. I got aggression.
Oh, no, I didn't mean it that way. But I mean, you're confronting the ideas that are creating stigma and whatnot. I'm using a more passive approach. You're using a more active approach.
I'm more going after the atheists that say, well, you know, I don't know everything, and it's possible that there could be a God, but the chances are 0.000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of shit. Because when you look at it, I was actually talking to my daughter about this the other night. I said to her, if you imagine, here's the hypothetical, okay? Here's the hypothetical. Imagine that human life on Earth is the only life in all of the cosmos and all of the everywhere. Imagine if that human life is the only life.
That's okay? A lonely thought.
It is a lonely thought, but think of it in terms of what are the chances that human life could exist at all. It's extremely small. It's extremely small. But here we are. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Which means that the statistical probability of there being human life in the universe is 100%.
Yeah, if it's possible, it will give it enough time and it'll happen. Yes.
We're the evidence of this.
Yes, exactly.
So we're 100%. Yeah.
100%. Exactly.
Humans exist in the cosmos.
What I don't like
everywhere in the cosmos. That's a different question.
What I don't like is when atheists say to the theists, it's possible. Your point of view, it's possible, but bullshit, I say. Bullshit. It's not possible. That's the problem that's what I'm trying to have atheists come from.
There is a subtle point here that I think needs to be made, because when I tell people I don't believe in their deities, I'm not taking the position they don't exist, but I'm not endorsing the idea that it's possible. For it to be possible, I need more evidence. So I'm not embracing that position either. But there are people who will misunderstand that and then turn around and say, "Oh yeah, so it is possible. I'm open to that." And well, you know, show me some evidence. Otherwise, I'm just not going there. Is where I'm at.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's a subtle distinction, you know, because I do agree with you. Like, people will say, "Oh, it's possible," which is actually a claim. To say I can only go as far as saying it's not impossible.
Exactly.
Would be a much better approach, I think, much clearer. But a lot of people don't want to have the extra wording in there because it's a little awkward to say it that way. But that's Matt Dillahunty pointed this distinction out. Instead of saying something's possible, he prefers to say he'll go along with it being not impossible. And it's a different. It is a bit of a different end. It leaves it's on the other side of the neutral zone.
Exactly, but there is no neutrality. It, you know,
Yeah.
Reality is reality, and there never was anything else.
Okay, so yeah, and this is an ontological approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm kind of more on the epistemological side, which is where Matt Dillahunty, I think.
Yeah,
is
no, I'm hardcore. I don't give the possibility any credence.
Hey, I didn't say possible. I just said not impossible, which is different than possible.
Well,
so
impossible is 100%. Possible is 100. Sorry, impossible is 0%, and possible is 100%.
Okay.
So now explain to me in your with numbers how your theory works.
I can't put numbers on it. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
It's just me not taking the position. So I'm at the point where I don't take a position on it, and that's it. So I'm quite comfortable with. I'm quite comfortable with not having a position on certain things.
Okay, let me ask you: are you publicly not taking a position, and you do have a position?
No, I really don't have a position on it.
Okay.
So. And people want me to justify that, and I say I was just born this way. That's the best justification I can give you. I just haven't been convinced either way all this time. And as far as the theist side of it, I'm not convinced the deity's there because there's been no evidence of it presented to me.
How are you convinced that it's a possibility, though?
I'm not convinced it's a possibility. I just can't rule out, to put it as a matter of fact, because I don't have, I can't say 100% they don't exist because I don't have the tools necessary to observe all places in the cosmos simultaneously and rule the deities out. So I can only go with what I know. I know right here, it seems that there's no deity. That's as far as I can go. But I don't have access to what's outside the observable universe. So I can't say 100%. I'm trying to be literally honest here about this, and that's why I'm going with this kind of approach. So now, certain definitions of God just don't make sense. You know, you've got some that have a paradox, like they're omniscient and omnipotent, and that's a paradox. So those ones we can rule those out right away with logic. So those ones we can safely say, yeah, it makes sense to assume they don't exist, right? Because and the paradox is that I explain is, say this deity is omniscient and omnipotent and has other factors. It doesn't matter, but they know that tomorrow we're going to get snow in my neighborhood. And then tomorrow rolls along, and that's using their omniscience to know that. And then tomorrow rolls along, and they use their omnipotence, their power, to change the weather to sunshine or rain. By doing that, they then invalidate their omniscience from the day before, and therein lies the paradox.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's why I can rule that one out right away. As soon as they put those two characteristics on, then I know right away. Logic can throw that out the window.
Right.
So I have to look at them on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. So when
I'm trying to be fair, but not be over welcoming. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but what I'm trying to think is that I think being fair is not the playing field that they want you to play on, or that they will let you play on.
That's not my problem.
And I'll tell you why. Because these people are cultists. They're Christian cultists. And in a cultist will not listen to another point of view. They're brainwashed into their own point of view. This is what we
Yep.
see coming into our hangouts all the time, in our calling
Oh, sure.
shows all the time.
I've seen it too. Yeah.
So this is all we have. This is who we're dealing with. These types of people.
Yeah.
Most everybody else, they're regular people. Don't care. They don't care one or the other. They have their regular lives, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, there's. I'm going to continue to work in this direction, and I know other people are going to use different approaches. And to me, one of the most important things about the atheism demographic that we're both in is that we both happen to be a part of. Is probably a better way of saying it. Is that it is one of the most diverse demographics in the world, and there's so many different approaches to things. And as soon as somebody says all atheists should be doing this or should be doing that, that's a red flag to me. That's a problem. That's how cults begin.
Yes, that's how they talk, though.
It ticks a box in the bite model. Yeah. So I actually push back against any atheist who says that all atheists should conform to a certain thing in order to be an atheist. No, the only thing is not believing in any deities is sufficient. It's a classificational requirement. It's not something you conform to. At any time, an atheist could start believing, and they are no longer an atheist. There's nothing in atheism holding them back. This is up to each individual. So, yeah, because the approach I use, I know there's a lot of people trying to deconvert religious people. The approach I use is I'm specifically not doing that. But I am very much in favor of introducing them to new ideas. And I find this kind of approach tends to result in better quality conversations with theists. So they'll sometimes come back to me and say, oh, yeah, I thought about this. And they decided on their own. And to me, that I find that has a much more long-lasting effect because they've come to that on their own volition instead of being pressured into it. And so the two good things. One is they don't feel under any kind of pressure. They feel quite safe talking with people with this kind of attitude. And then they tend to be a little more open to considering the other ideas. So that's the approach I use. It doesn't work for everybody. And I'm not saying everybody should do this. It's just what I find
everybody's a different personality, and yeah,
you got it.
Of course.
And people should do that. People should decide for themselves who they are as much as they can.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's the freedom intrinsic in not being beholden to the whims and demands and edicts of some celestial dictator. We decide for ourselves. We are our own leaders. We have this within us. We should all be our own leaders. Yeah. So
the thing is that every one of us atheists has come to our conclusions ourselves.
Most of us have.
For the most part. But every single one of these theists has come to the conclusion because they were told the conclusion. Because none of them present an argument that is coherent when they try and defend it.
Yeah, and some of them make some pretty good tries, though. But that's true. There's, it's funny. I was just talking yesterday with somebody about some of this, and there are some theists who believe that their God has to work within the confines of logic, and yet there are other theists who believe that their deity can circumvent the laws of logic.
Of course.
So. And they have different reasons for this. So just sorting out these details is important too.
If there was one God, one creator, because there can't be more than one creator, right? If there was one creator,
can't there be more than one?
Because they'd argue, and they'd create a world like this.
I like to ask them in debates how do they rule out the possibility of co-creators or a group of creators working as a team, and those conversations don't go very far. They don't like those.
Well, I came up with God is omnipotent, or God can do anything, right? So if God can create this universe, God can create another universe or many universes or as many universes as this God
Okay.
wants to, and every universe can be different. So I said to the panel that I was in, I said, look, let's have a hypothetical. We've got this universe which God created, and then we have another universe which God created where God is good, and all the people on the planet Earth are innately good people who look out for the well-being of themselves and others, and evil is at an absolute minimum because everybody's innately looking out for themselves, for the community, and not out to harm, and everything is beautiful because
I find this is true of most
God
people.
is good. And in that case, in that universe, God would be good because God is, the people are living life expected of one where a good God dictates everything. In this universe, on the other hand, we have an evil God because
Yeah.
look,
Ordering father to kill his own son.
right,
Yeah.
look,
All that stuff. Yeah.
exactly. And
I know, I have a
also,
big problem with that.
and
I don't
also,
like child abuse.
I put out a challenge a couple of weeks back, and I'm declaring victory.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
What are you victorious in?
My challenge was all gods are imaginary. Prove me wrong. And I said, here's the deal. You come in, don't ask me questions. I'll shut up. You just prove me wrong. That's it.
Real simple.
Okay,
Giving
real
them the
simple.
floor.
Just prove me wrong. Don't ask me any questions. Just prove me wrong.
Actually, a nice way to do it.
And I had a few people come in and go straight to the Bible and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't last very long. But nobody else came in. Nobody came in and took up the challenge to prove me wrong without asking me a bunch of stupid questions. And therefore, I declare victory.
Because they asked you questions.
No, because they couldn't prove me wrong. No,
Yeah, okay.
I don't come in and ask me, what do you mean by God? Or what do you mean by prove? What do you mean by this? Just as you understand it, you come and prove me wrong. That's the way I want to do it.
That's really their wheelhouse because they're the ones that believe in it. They're
Exactly.
the ones that need to present some definition of what that deity is.
Yeah, because they have a God in mind that they believe in, and I'm saying to them that your God is imaginary. Prove me wrong. Well, nothing.
They'd probably accuse you of shifting the burden of proof to them, right?
They accuse me of all sorts of things. I didn't even. I wasn't even paying attention.
A year or two ago on Twitter.
Yeah.
A year or two ago on Twitter, a Christian asked atheists, "What would it take to prove that their God is real?"
Yes.
So and there's all kinds of responses, but I responded that I would need for them to, because the Christian God's omniscient, omnipotent, and a bunch of other things. Mm-hmm. I said I would need your God to provide to me omniscience and omnipotence for a fortnight, for 2 weeks, so that I could go and experiment, create a few universes or galaxies and destroy them, and
fair enough.
Do some other kind of experiments, see how far the universe goes and stuff like that.
Right.
And that would be enough to prove to me that your God is real. And a lot of atheists are like, yeah, that would do it for me. A few theists said, yeah, that would be quite compelling. And then some of the theists responded. The most common response was they tried to negotiate the amount of time I would need. They want to negotiate it down to less than 2 weeks. That was my favorite response.
That's hilarious. Assholes.
They want to negotiate the time. I said, nope, 2 weeks. I'm being just as arbitrary as your deity.
Right.
But 2 weeks would do it for me.
Unbelievable.
I thought that was so funny. You wouldn't need 2 weeks. I said, I want 2 weeks. That's my criteria.
The only thing
asked, there it is.
The only thing I'm kind of concerned about is that the quality of opposition that we're getting is Darth Dawkins and Mr. Batman. and that is no opposition at all. So we need to up the game.
I had a brief chat with Mr. Batman. He seemed quite nice. I've spoken with Darth Dawkins 5 times, and I've got an idea for. I put the challenge out to him. The next time I talk with him, I'm going to use his own argument against him, and it'll be very interesting to see how he responds. And quite a few of his supporters and followers are trying to make this happen because they want to see this.
I want to see this too.
Yeah,
because you have probably been his nemesis because he doesn't faze you.
You think so?
I don't see you being phased. I see you sitting there laughing him.
No,
he rips you to pieces. He rips you to pieces.
No, he doesn't.
In front of your face.
He thinks he does.
Yeah, I know, but he does. He thinks he's doing the ripping, but you just sit there laughing at him, and you laugh at him. I know. Do you know how that annoys a narcissist?
I didn't realize, but now that you mention it, I never thought of it that way, but that kind of makes sense. Oh boy, no wonder he got so mad.
Oh yeah, that's why he did that hit piece on you afterwards. Have you heard it?
Oh, well, I've heard a couple. Which one are you talking about?
The one where
where he calls me retarded, deer in the headlights, and all that.
I'm trying to think where you were. Who were you with at the time?
Canadian Catholic.
Could be, I forget, but he went and did he went back to his room and did a hit piece on you. I was just with Randolph Richardson. Can you believe Randolph Richardson, the head of Canadian? He's so stupid. I asked him what came before the Big Bang, and do you know what he said?
Oh, I didn't hear this one.
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, he's been mad at me a few times, and it's okay. You know, I'm hoping it's therapeutic for him.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me what I thought about him what I thought about him calling me retarded, and I said, well, I think he just pronounced my name incorrectly because he was upset.
Yeah.
I don't imagine that'll be received well by him, but
the thing is, what is received well by him? Nothing.
Okay, so I guess I took a shortcut there without realizing it.
Oh, okay. I found the piece. I found it.
Okay.
Hang on one moment.
He's unique.
He certainly is.
You know, the first time I spoke with him was about 7 or 8 years ago on Google Plus, and I've not ever been able to find that video. Once I do, I'm going to post it up. But the other ones, the other 4 times, I've got copies of those. So, or they're out there somewhere.
Okay, so I do have the video up. I just have to.
Yeah, he's in Discord usually doing this stuff, as far as I know.
No, he's out of Discord. He's kicked out of Discord.
He got kicked out of Discord? I didn't know Discord was kicking people out.
No, it wasn't Discord himself. It wasn't Discord itself. It was the rooms that he was in. All the Christians started turning against him.
Oh, why?
Well, because...
well, I guess I know some don't.
I guess because he was starting to...
Call me
He was starting to clash with Christians because he's so rude, and Christians were saying, "Hey, that's not Christian."
Were they from different denominations? They must have been from different denominations.
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah. But that'll do it for somebody like him. Yeah, it's probably a denominational thing. That wouldn't surprise me.
Right. So I'm just gonna try and do this.
Yeah, good old VLC player. I like it too. I use it as well.
Right on. Now I might have to turn my camera.
Meltdown. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, good old Tom Rabbit posting this
stuff.
Let me
know.
up.
I don't know if you can hear audio, but let me know if you can. If you Can you hear the audio?
Well, you haven't played it. You haven't started playing it yet.
It's
What
playing.
is your personal
Can you hear?
opinion
I'm not
on
hearing anything.
people
Not hearing anything.
How about
who
now?
practice witchcraft?
I think you're going to eternal
Oh,
damnation,
hear it now.
one heartbeat away from eternal damnation, just
Yep.
like there are people who don't practice witchcraft. Okay? But witchcraft is just, it's another, your sorcery, witchcraft, your whatever your paganism, it's just another version of atheism. So, and by atheism, I mean that the rejection and the direct or indirect denial that there's an ultimate, absolute creator God.
It's worse than atheism.
The audio is breaking
I
up
didn't hear
too
you.
much.
By the way, Aspect, you gotta know.
I said, wouldn't you say that it's worse than atheism?
No. I take atheism to be the denial, direct or indirect, of an ultimate creator God. That
Yeah, he keeps cutting out.
somebody
The
believes
audio
in
keeps
some,
cutting out.
quote, deities.
I'm sorry, man.
Those aren't
It's really
God
hard
as
to
far
follow
as I'm
it.
concerned. They're just creatures.
Yeah, you'll basically need to start it again once you get it playing.
You can just call me Darth.
This one doesn't sound familiar to me so far.
What is your personal opinion on people who practice witchcraft?
I think you're going to eternal damnation. You're one heartbeat away from eternal damnation, just like there are people who don't practice witchcraft. Okay? But witchcraft is just, it's another, your sorcery, witchcraft, your whatever your paganism, it's just another version of atheism. So,
Much better.
and by atheism, I mean that the rejection and the direct or indirect denial that there's an ultimate, absolute creator God.
It's worse than atheism?
I didn't hear you. By the way, Aspect, you gotta know.
I said, wouldn't you say that it's worse than atheism?
No. I take atheism to be the denial, direct or indirect, of an ultimate creator God. That somebody believes in some, quote, deities. Those aren't God as far as I'm concerned. They're just creatures that are enveloped by a greater reality that everybody would be subject to, as opposed to an ultimate absolute creator who institutes what's possible and impossible in its entirety. So paganism,
He has a very dark view here.
Just a variant of classical atheism, because in paganism, there's still the refusal to acknowledge the one and true ultimate creator. The fact that you may believe in some junior deities that won't escape you from classical atheism. You're both facing a reality which is shrouded in ultimate mystery and darkness. Okay, it's that simple.
I got you. So, would you say that because I was born into the Christian faith, but as I got older and I went through some personal things and I tried keeping strong to my faith and I tried praying and I tried going to other I tried going to church leaders, praying, reading scripture, but I felt that no matter how much I did, there was no light at the end of the tunnel during that time. Would it be fair for me
What does that even mean?
Like I was having a hard time with my faith basically, and I felt like I wasn't.
So you were having a hard time that there is an eternal, absolute creator God. You're having a hard time with that?
No, I was having a hard time in my life personally, not necessarily with my beliefs. And I tried to pray and ask for help. I tried asking God for help in any way, whether it be sending someone to me to help me through these dark times or just something. But in the end, it felt like no matter how much faith I put in and how much I prayed or read scripture or just whatever I did, in the moment I felt like I wasn't being helped. Would it be fair for me to be upset during that time towards God?
Not only would it be unfair, it would be irrational. There's nothing that you can impugn God with. That would be, if you attempted to do that, you would be a megalomaniac. On what grounds could
Have
you
you ever thought
impugn
about getting
God?
off your fat ass and doing it yourself instead of asking somebody else
Bart,
for help?
Bart, please don't. Hey, Bart, please don't. There's no, you don't need to do that, Bart. Okay. Listen. She's being polite and civil. Okay. Yeah, your position, as emotionally as it is presented, it's just simply not coherent, because you're trying to reason about your world without reference to God and his self-disclosure of himself. Okay. So when you attempt to reason, correlate, connect the dots about anything, and you leave God out and his self-disclosure, then you have no grounds to say that anything means anything, because in your world anything can happen. Nothing is impossible. And if nothing can be identified and defended to be impossible, then you can't have meaning or reason.
I think I understand.
Do you think that is in your world is anything impossible?
I feel like there are things that are impossible for us as mortal people. We can only do so much.
What is impossible?
Well, as mortals, we can't live forever.
Okay, and what is it that at a fundamental and ultimate level in all that exists that would impose that?
Could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I want to know what is foundational, what is primary in existence that makes anything what it is, and precludes certain impossibility. What is it fundamentally that makes anything impossible? You
I
see, if you
guess
ask me that question, I would say it is the Lord of creation, Jesus Christ, who's the
Mhm.
same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But you obviously don't accept that. I hope you do someday. But since you don't accept that, in order for you to speak coherently, intelligibly about your world, it's gonna require that some things are impossible. Otherwise, you have no grounds for reason. So, what is it that fundamentally and absolutely makes anything impossible?
Yeah, it's starting to
I
fade out
guess
again,
just
Sidney. So he doesn't
because
sound.
of
You know, it
how
just sounds.
humans are,
Yeah,
we limit
it's not playing
ourselves
very well.
to be able to do so much. I think that's what you're trying to. I'm sorry. I'm trying to
No.
understand.
I'm asking why anything cannot happen or be.
Um,
Oh, okay. Well, if you want to play a little more, that's fine. He just sounds like he's having a conversation with someone, and he's not really angry here. Them as creatures, and the way he describes it sounds almost creepy. He has a pretty dark view about all this stuff, but somehow his God is not the creepy one, who sees all. He makes special exception for his own deity, for his own God. And a lot of people talk about trying to throw him off his script. I don't go there either, but there's it's interesting seeing people see that as a challenge. You know, they're having fun. He does provide a lot of entertainment for a lot of people. I just have to. Okay, yeah, just find it and see if you can get the audio working better. I have. I just need to make a quick phone call here. Not quite yet. I'm just on the phone. Just give me another 30 seconds. They didn't answer. I talked to one other, but okay. I actually made 3 calls. All right.
Yeah, you did well, Randolph.
So Crispy just said,
I apologize on behalf of
Crispy,
Christians, Randolph.
Nobody has to.
Meanwhile,
I remember
at
this
the
one.
Legion of Doom.
Idiot. Oh my goodness, I can't.
Oh my God. This is the guy who's the head of Canadian Atheist. I mean, have you ever heard, and you're going to have to excuse me, folks, have you ever heard such a dumb fuck in your whole life?
What happened? What happened, man? What happened?
The guy is such an
Oh
idiot.
my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
This guy is as dumb as a 5th grader. And he claims he's the head of American Atheists. I pointed out to him that his position entails the falsity of God. And he says only implicitly, not explicitly. And I said, it makes no difference. I said, either way, your position entails the falsity of God. Now, I said, how is it that God does not exist? And he said, that's not a position I hold to.
What an idiot. Oh my
I've heard this one before.
I mean,
how much
listen
of an
to me.
idiot.
Oh,
Listen.
And I actually spoke with Jay Robin just yesterday. So, yeah, he uses Darth Dawkins' arguments, but he's much more cordial, and you can actually have a conversation with him. But he pushes and pushes, and he really pushes hard to try to get his interlocutor to take a position, even though they may not take one. This drives them crazy that there are people like me who won't take the position either way. And yeah, that's yeah. But then they have an avenue of attack. It's very discomforting for them when they don't have that avenue of attack. And so that's why they try so hard, right? So that's the problem that they have with me and others like me who are just purely atheists, not taking any position on anything, on deities and belief positions, right? So yeah, they use all kinds of interesting tactics, and it's good practice. I actually find he pushes really hard, so I take it as practice, because when I'm up against other people in debates, then it's not so not so difficult, because I've seen how bad it can get and experienced it. So I'm actually, it looks like I'm going to be debating with a Muslim on Modern Day Debate, maybe end of next week. And the topic's going to be along the lines of whether Islam is the right solution for all of humanity. Modern Day Debate has a topic, and the other guy wanted something for the West originally, and then I wrote back to James that let's make it for the whole world, because the East and the West, the cultures there's been a lot of blurring and a lot of cross-cultural stuff going on. So it's really, the distinction isn't so clear anymore. We'll just do it for all of humanity then. And he's like, okay. He got the other guy to agree to that. And so I think the guy sees Islam as all over the time, different times. This is looking like it's going to be Friday next week. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, because I've not had a formal debate with Muslims before. I've spoken with them off of, like, informally, but haven't really gotten into too much detail with them. This one, I don't think I need to know too much about Islam to debate it, because its primary concern is what's good for humanity, and he can present ideas, and we can question those ideas, right? So we'll see where it goes. It's going to be, I think, an interesting topic to cover, because there are a lot of Muslims who I've encountered who do believe that Islam is the solution for all of humanity. That's part of wanting the global caliphate and the whole world run under Islam. So, because they, like a lot of Christians, they believe that their religion is, if only everybody on the planet would get on the same page and follow the religion at the same time, then we could actually have world peace, is what their claim very often is. Yeah. No, I would recognize them as a terroristic influence, and I would not recognize their authority. So I would have to examine what my options are and decide which approach I would have to use. Again, I'd have to try to figure out what my options are. Well, yeah, right, because I value human rights and they don't. So, you know, I'd probably look into any underground networks and see if I could join one of those. I know that. I know. I know. Yeah, it's it's hard to say for sure what I would do. I'd have to look at a lot of different factors, like where's my family at and my friends and things like that too. And so there's a lot, right? But I definitely would not want to comply, because I value my personal sovereignty. Yeah, I want to. I would want to make sure that the choice I make is going to result in not dying in the process and not hurting others as much as possible, right? So I can find a peaceful way out. That's definitely the preference, right? They are a terrorist influence, though, so they need to be annihilated for the good of the country, because they don't. Like I said, I wouldn't recognize that if they took over. I wouldn't recognize it. Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Yeah, they would have killed them all off. That's how they would have taken over. Yeah, they would have to. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. That's their dream, to hold society back. You know, I'd find a way. Yeah, I'd find a way. I In Iran, there's a huge underground movement of atheists, and they're quite separated from each other, but there's for safety reasons. But it's amazing. I've met quite a few of the people who are involved in that over the years, and some of the estimates coming out from them are that about 80% of the whole population of Iran is not don't believe in any of that stuff. Most of them just pretend. So, oh, it's all ages. All ages. I'm not clear. I don't have the answer for that. I don't know. But there are people of all ages in both sexes involved in all that, right? So there's in Iran, you can see the Iranian government's kind of taking different approaches on things because I think they're trying to mitigate some of this stuff because I think they're aware. So it's interesting. Yeah. Not very closely. I just get the gist of it on the radio, on the news. There's so much going on, and I have a lot of other things I have to do. I only have so much time. I'd rather spend it on more positive things because. Yeah, I'm hearing about that on the news. Yeah, I don't talk publicly of my views on China because so many people disagree on it, and it just ends up resulting in. I do. Yeah. You're not getting rid of them, but they have they they do heavily regulate the religions. Like when the Catholics first wanted to go in there, they said the Chinese government said, okay, but we can change the bishops who are in charge whenever we want to. And the Catholic Church said, oh well, then we're not going to set up here. And China said, okay. And then later the Catholics came back and said, okay, we'll go along with it. I think the Catholics probably saw, okay, it's either we get this demographic or we don't. This is what it takes. Okay. Yeah. And so they did that. And I do think that I think, well, you can say this about every country. There's good things and there's not so good things, and sometimes there's some really bad things. And each country's different. Like here in Canada, it's not perfect either. We've got things that we need to improve. Yeah, we've got things we need to improve here too, right? So, well, I've seen it and I push back against it, but I don't see it as being as nearly as serious of a problem as what's in the US, for example. Yeah. It's not part of my Canadian culture. It's not acceptable. And nearly all the people I deal with on a regular basis are not racist and against it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. My last elementary school, there were lots of First Nations people there too, students, and so I even joined the First Nations art class. Back then, they were just called Native Indians, and they call themselves. And sorry. Oh, okay. So yeah, so I had lots of friends, and I went on the reserves a few times with my friends, and the experience on that was in the 80s, I guess, early 80s, and my experience with that was that going on the reserve with my friends, they'd say, "Yeah, stay close to me, don't go off on your own." So I went there, and a couple of times there were people saying, "What's a white man doing on my land?" And it's okay, he's with me. Yeah. And then the kid told him to F off. It's like, holy cow. It's like, yeah. Oh yeah, he had to let everyone know you're okay. So you know, yeah. So one of the reserves I went on with one guy, we're walking down, and then I asked him about, because everything looked like it was totally run down, and then I looked down the block, and there's this mansion at the end, and it's all nicely looked after. It's just complete contrast, and all these crappy looking homes next to it, and trailers and stuff. And I said, I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, the chief lives there," and they didn't think anything of it. It was fine. It's just normal. Well, the chief needs it because I said, well, he's got a nice place. He says, oh yeah, because he's got to see people from the government, and they have to come there and all this. They got to make a nice presentation or something as to that effect. I don't know. I have no idea about any of that. I don't know how they run it. So, but I yeah, and some of my friends have told me they're really glad to get off the reserves and live a normal life. And I found out later that there's all kinds of reasons for this discrepancy, and they're not good reasons. So and I'm not saying all the reserves are like this, but this particular one was, and so that was obviously an issue. So there's, I'm guessing, some kind of corruption there in that case. So it's kind of obvious, right? But yeah, I never had any trouble getting along with anybody at school when I was in elementary school, and same in high school. But there were some kids there who were racist, and they got put in their place pretty fast. One kid had this expensive dental work done on his teeth, and the braces with the metal things that go outside, and all this is the old-fashioned style, right? And he one time used the derogatory racist term for a Native Indian person, and one of the kids was ready to just pound him, who's part of that demographic, right? But the teacher was there, so later on, there he is getting a drink from the fountain. It's these old fountains that have the metal thing that sticks up, right? And you're drinking. He's bending over drinking it. And this kid comes behind him and pow! And there's blood all over the place. The kid went to hospital. He had to get surgery, had busted jaw, and the kid's just wailing on him. I just turned, went up the hallway. Other kids are there, and teachers coming out. It's like, I don't want to be a witness to this. There's lots of witnesses already. It's fine. But yeah, he really made people mad by using that term. So the hostility definitely exists, right? And it took him, I think it was 2 or 3 months before he was able to come back to school. And it was major surgery he had to get, because it busted a couple of bones in his jaw and dislocated stuff. And he lost most of his teeth. He had to get a whole bunch of implants or something. And so I'm not sure. It's just, it was quite messy. And after that, I tell you, he was so respectful to those kids. He never he didn't mess up at all. And every time they came like that to him, he flinched. He was scared. He got the message. It was like, wow, I'm surprised he came back to the same school, actually. But that was really something. Yeah, I'll never forget that. But it's weird that I think racism is not only mean. I think it's weird. It's unethical. And it creates problems in society that are totally unnecessary. It is irrelevant, and because people are people, and we should all be treated equally. And to see this kind of stuff it's disturbing to a lot of people to see, as I've seen violence before, so it didn't disturb me, but I didn't like it. But I understood why, because I knew the two kids, I'd seen the interaction before it happened out in the hallway. So I knew exactly why that kid was mad. And I got to tell you, I didn't disagree with him. I don't think it should have escalated to an act of violence, but I totally understand why it did. And I think back, would I have tried to stop it? Yeah, if I knew it was going to happen, I probably would have tried to stop it, because I don't like violence, but he learned a valuable lesson, and a very expensive one too. Bad for his health, and it was bad for his parents' pocketbooks. Because it's not entirely free. So yeah, so there were a few issues and some conflicts, but it didn't go very far most of the time. And the principal was really good. He I think he might have been First Nations as well, and an ex-football player. And he a huge guy. He had to duck to go into the doorways. You know, public schools here, the doors are pretty tall already. I think he was probably over 7 feet tall. This guy's massive and wide too. It's just a big guy, but real nice guy. He was always into. We didn't have detention at the school. It was always consequences. So if you wrote on the walls, you didn't get detention. You get to clean up the walls. And so people see you cleaning the walls, they know why, because you must have done that, because everybody understood how the consequences work. And so you aren't in detention bragging about it. And while you're cleaning the walls, you're not bragging either. It's just because sometimes people are actually walking past you and watching you clean it up and laughing about you got caught, ha ha ha, this kind of stuff, right? But you know, you never see these people writing on the walls again after they've had to clean it up. It's amazing how effective consequences work, and the consequences matched too, right? So, well, if the principal caught the kid, some kid laughing at you while you're cleaning it up, then you'd suddenly have a volunteer helper. So he volunteered them. So people were respectful as well. No one's going to laugh about it. So yeah, that's right. And so people usually didn't laugh about it either, because they knew that they would end up being there to help. They'd be brought into it. Oh, you're going to laugh at this? Great, you can help them. Because that's breaking the respect rule. So that's that happened. So it was a really good school that way. And this principal would, when kids had a conflict, he would bring them to his office and do what's called problem solving. This is great. The teacher doesn't have to do it because the teacher's focused on teaching the class. He takes care of all this, and the vice principal would do it as well. And if there was a need for it, but usually there wasn't too much of it, so he'd be able to handle it all. And yeah, so there's some bullying situation going on. He'd bring the kids up and figure out what the problem is and get it worked out between them, and at least get a truce. They weren't necessarily becoming friends, but sometimes they were. But usually that was it, and the problem was basically taken care of. And he would resolve it in a way that you're actually trying to solve the problem, not just sweep it under the rug and ignore it and move on. Right. Actual problem solving. Mm-hmm. And he was good at it. And that takes a lot of effort, I think, to get that right. And he did. So in most circumstances, he was able to genuinely resolve it. Good Some kids, stuff. You can't, but most cases you can. So yeah, that was a good school. Nice. So yeah, no, they had the right approach on that. And the other schools, there's detention, and I remember being in detention a few times, and people are all there bragging about, oh, what did you do? Why are you here? We all want to hear each other's stories. Yeah. It's not detention. It's the place where you go and socialize, except when the teacher's in there. And once they're out, then you go and socialize again. What were you in for? Like, yeah, detention doesn't work. Yeah. So, but yeah, so you were you living in Africa before, or before Canada, or somewhere else?
Africa.
Okay.
Well, no. South Africa. What's going on?
Oh, South Africa. Okay.
Yeah. And Israel before here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So South Africa, Israel, Canada. That's my my triangle.
You know, I met a guy many years ago who was telling me about he's Jewish, and he went for lunch, and then with some other people, right? And then he started telling us about his project. 'Cause
Yeah.
he's from Israel.
Yeah.
He has somehow identified where the new promised land is. And he's trying to raise money to move all the Jews from Israel to the new promised land so that there can be world peace. And, and you know where the new promised land is? It straddles the border of northern part of BC and Alaska.
That's not going to fly. That's
No.
not going to fly. Get the Israelis
No.
to go from their climate to a northern
Oh, I
BC
know.
climate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like mid to northern BC. That's and he's got this all plan laid out. He had a website. It's not there anymore, but he had all this stuff up there. I'm looking at this. Wow, he's put a lot of. Where's like how a conspiracy theorist will put work into stuff like this. So that is a new one to me.
Yeah.
There's always something new coming up, right? So, and I don't know how much money he raised, but I'm certain it wasn't nearly enough. He got into some legal trouble with unrelated things to do with guns and stuff like that. So trying to bring them across the border or something. So that turned into an issue.
What an idiot!
He is an interesting fellow. I liked talking with him until he got into this stuff, and then I thought, okay, yeah, off the deep end now. Otherwise, he's quite a nice guy, and quite intelligent, and yeah. So I have a meeting coming up soon. I'm going to have to go.
Yeah,
but,
we've been coming up. I'm coming into 3 hours of streaming, so it's a good time to end. That'll be very, very symbiotic. If you have to leave and I have to cut this down.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, thanks for inviting me in. I appreciate it. And that was an interesting stream you had going earlier.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to continue it. I'm going to continue it either later on tonight or whenever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you dropping in. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. The Darth. That actually put it onto my MP3 memory stick in my vehicle, and once in a while I listen to it on a long drive.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
But what you've got there looks like quite a bit of it's been cut off. Like I think yours is like 15 minutes. So yeah, he goes on and on. It's just really something.
Well, hopefully.
I don't listen to it very often, but I have a bunch of debates and things that I take and discussions that I listen once in a while.
What I was playing earlier was I had just
the first one.
Yeah, exactly. The first one, I just come into the debate against these guys. They were spewing their nonsense, and then I come in, and that's where I cut it off, and that's where I'll continue next episode. Because that's where I take them on, and I've got all my proof.
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, that's where you took them on.
Yeah, it's an old.
I haven't heard that one.
It's an old hangout with me. I used to have these hangouts back in the 2015, 2016. That time period. It was all. I had like 4 channels, and it was like that was my life. And then when Trump got in, I kind of stopped, and now I've picked it up again.
Yeah, he ruined a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but
for a lot of people,
we're picking it up. And,
I'm amazed that there are Trump supporters here in Canada.
Especially now.
It looks like you're lagging.